The galaxy trembled under the weight of an unstoppable threat. The Turnox, a species of hyper-advanced, war-hungry conquerors, had already crushed dozens of civilizations in their wake. Their warships, massive and terrifying, moved like shadows across the stars, leaving nothing but ashes behind. No one had ever survived their invasion until humanity. It started as a routine day on Earth. At first, the alarm bells and red flashing lights seemed like an anomaly, a glitch in the system. However, the storm that followed was very real. The Turnox arrived in the early morning hours, descending in ships that blotted out the sky, casting the planet into an unnatural twilight. Their appearance wasn't accompanied by the chaos of explosions or the usual signs of war. They were patient, methodical. Humanity's military leaders had barely enough time to react before the invaders launched their first strike. A devastating pulse wave that scrambled all communications and knocked out power grids across the world. Cities fell into darkness, and chaos erupted as nations tried to organize a defense. But it was clear, the Turnox weren't here to negotiate or bargain. They were here to dominate. Inside the UN Security Council, leaders from every nation scrambled to come up with a plan. The Turnox had annihilated fleets of ships in mere minutes, their technology far surpassing anything humanity had developed. The world's most powerful weapons, nuclear, biological, and even quantum, were useless against their impenetrable shields. General Catherine Rowe, head of Earth's Global Defense Force, watched the displays with growing despair. She had trained for years, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Turnox were invincible, their fleets seemingly endless, their soldiers ruthless, their tactics precise. "We need a miracle," she muttered to herself, but she didn't believe in miracles. She had seen the death toll rise with each passing minute, and she knew humanity didn't have much time. As the Turnox made landfall in major cities, Earth's defense forces launched a desperate counteroffensive. Fighter jets engaged their warships in the skies, but their weapons were like toys to the Turnox. Ground forces were overwhelmed by foot soldiers that could phase through walls, their claws ripping through armor like paper. The people of Earth, trying to hold on to their cities and homes, fought valiantly, but the invaders' power was too great. Even as the death toll mounted, humanity held on to something that the Turnox could not understand: hope. It was a strange, unquantifiable thing. The Turnox believed that to win was to destroy everything that existed. Humanity believed that to win was to never give up, no matter the odds. In the heart of the Pacific Ocean, a small group of scientists in a hidden research facility had been working on a secret project, Project Requiem. It was an idea that seemed too impossible to achieve, yet they persisted. They had been studying Turnox technology for years, analyzing every scrap of it they could recover from failed skirmishes in distant colonies. They knew that humanity's only chance lay in understanding their enemy's technology at a molecular level. Dr. Alina Kerr, the lead scientist, stared at the holographic displays, her fingers dancing over the controls. "It's almost ready," she said, her voice tinged with both hope and disbelief. "But we need time, and we don't have it." Beside her, Dr. Michael Farrow, a physicist, looked grim. "Even if we complete it, we still don't know how to deploy it. The Turnox will wipe us out before we even have a chance to strike." And yet, for the first time in days, there was a spark of hope, tiny, flickering, but unmistakable. Humanity had not yet been completely crushed. Something deep inside them refused to give up, even as the end seemed inevitable. General Rowe's voice crackled over the global communication line, a beacon of determination amid the chaos. "We're not done yet. We'll fight to the last man, to the last woman. The Turnox think they've won, but they don't understand us. They don't understand what makes humanity strong." Her voice carried through every communication channel on Earth, uniting the fractured world into one collective force. Civilians took up arms where they could. Refugees became resistance fighters, and every last soldier fought with the same resolve. They knew the odds were impossible, but it didn't matter. For them, there was no other choice. From the ashes of destruction, humanity had begun to rise. The relentless onslaught of the Turnox continued, But something strange began to happen. Earth's cities, despite being bombarded and overrun, refused to fall completely. Resistance cells, initially scattered and disorganized, were starting to form a more cohesive network. For the first time since the invasion began, the Turnox faced resistance that didn't crumble after a single skirmish. In the heart of New York City, one of the last human strongholds, an unlikely group of survivors gathered in the ruins of what had once been Central Park. They were not soldiers or tacticians, but regular civilians, engineers, teachers, nurses, farmers. They had all lost something in the attack, but they had something far more dangerous to the Turnox: unity. Their survival was a small miracle, but they had seen enough of the invaders' tactics to understand their weaknesses. They had learned from every failure. Zoe Turner, a civilian engineer who had been working on rebuilding electrical grids before the invasion, now found herself acting as the group's leader. They rely on fear. They think they can break us with power and force. But what they don't understand is that we can outlast them, she said. Her voice quiet but steady. Her words had weight, and in the ruins of that once proud city, people were beginning to believe it. Across the world, humanity's resistance was growing in similar pockets. In the Sahara Desert, former military engineers had converted their old weaponry into makeshift EMP devices, neutralizing Turnox drones. In the jungles of South America, guerrilla fighters began to sabotage the enemy's supply chains. Every successful strike, no matter how small, sowed seeds of rebellion. And as the Turnox systematically destroyed Earth's major cities, they overlooked the one thing that had been humanity's strength from the start: the indomitable will to fight back, no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. Meanwhile, deep in the Pacific, the scientists working on Project Requiem were approaching a breakthrough. The process had been long, filled with setbacks and moments of despair. But Dr. Alina Kerr, her hands stained with exhaustion, stood before a new hologram that pulsed with energy. "We did it," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Beside her, Dr. Farrow was equally stunned. "Is it viable?" Alina's eyes scanned the complex designs, her mind racing with the implications. "It's more than viable. It's exactly what we need, but we're going to need a launch site. And we don't have one." Dr. Michael Farrow's eyes widened as realization hit him. "We can't bring it to them. They'll stop us long before we can get it off the ground. But if we reverse engineer it, if we use their technology against them..." Alina nodded slowly. "We can hit them where it hurts most." But even as the plan began to take shape, the clock was ticking down. Turnox forces were moving closer to the research facility. Earth's resources were running out, and the invaders were growing more aggressive in their attempts to locate and destroy any form of resistance. The Turnox, arrogant and assuming their victory was inevitable, began to shift their tactics. Their fleet spread farther, beginning the process of systematically eradicating what remained of Earth's population. Cities became ghost towns, and any survivors were hunted down like prey. The Turnox had underestimated humanity's resolve, but now they began to grow wary. The longer the war dragged on, the more it became apparent that humanity was not going to fall as easily as they had expected. General Rowe's voice crackled once again across the communications network, this time with a grim but determined tone. "They're spreading themselves thin. We can't beat them on sheer strength, but we can outsmart them. The fight's not over. Not by a long shot." From a high command in their underground bunkers, strategies were devised to exploit the Turnox's overconfidence. Earth's forces had no choice but to rely on guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and clever traps. The tides of war were beginning to shift in subtle but significant ways. Back in the Pacific, Dr. Kerr and her team worked tirelessly, modifying the alien technology they had studied. It was a gamble, a dangerous one, but it was humanity's only chance. They had reverse-engineered the Turnox's technology and weaponized it, creating a device capable of disabling their fleets. As the resistance operations grew bolder and more coordinated, humanity began to believe again. It wasn't about winning every battle. It was about surviving and finding new ways to strike back. The last remnants of Earth's military and civilian forces converged on a singular goal: to deploy the weapon that would change the course of the war. And so, the groundwork for humanity's greatest victory began, though none could have foreseen just how high the stakes would become. As Earth's resistance spread across the planet, the Turnoks found themselves facing something they had never anticipated: resilience. The human spirit, with its resourcefulness and determination, was proving to be the one thing their technology couldn't simply crush. In the small, secret bases where the last remnants of Earth's military forces gathered, the sound of hurried planning filled the air. General Catherine Rowe knew that time was running out. The enemy's advance had not slowed, and despite the growing resistance, the Turnoks had begun rounding up civilians in a terrifying campaign of reprisals. The situation was becoming desperate. But Rowe held firm in her belief that the tide could be turned, if they could just get the weapon into the hands of those who could use it. In an underground facility in the Australian outback, a special operations unit, led by Captain Sarah Lynn, was tasked with the most crucial mission humanity had ever attempted. Their target was the Turnoks' Central Command vessel, an immense ship that orbited Earth like a dark, malevolent moon. If they could infiltrate it and plant the newly developed weapon inside, the entire enemy fleet could be crippled. It was a mission of almost impossible odds, but they had no other choice. Captain Lynn had been one of the first to witness the Turnoks' overwhelming strength firsthand. She had seen her entire squad wiped out in a single skirmish, and yet, here she was, rallying a new unit. The loss of her comrades weighed heavily on her, but she knew the risks. Her new team wasn't made up of elite soldiers. They were the everyday men and women of Earth who had never fired a gun before the invasion. But their determination was something the Turnoks couldn't calculate. "The mission is simple," Lynn said to her diverse squad of civilians-turned-soldiers as they gathered in the dimly lit operations room. "We hit their flagship and we plant the device. We don't make noise. We don't take prisoners. We survive. The rest of the world is counting on us." The soldiers nodded, understanding the gravity of the task ahead. No one spoke of the likelihood of failure. They all knew what they faced. Yet there was something in the air, an unspoken promise that they would not let humanity fall into oblivion without a fight. As Captain Lynn's team prepared for their infiltration mission, Dr. Alina Kerr and her team of scientists had made a terrifying discovery. The Turnoks were not just invaders, they were interdimensional travelers. Their technology allowed them to phase through realities, bringing them into different dimensions where they could conquer civilizations without warning. They were, in essence, predators in a cosmic game, with humanity merely a new prize to claim. But there was hope hidden in this revelation. The weapon humanity had created was not just designed to disable Turnok ships. It was specifically crafted to interfere with the dimensional phase technology they used. It was a gamble, and if they failed to deploy it, humanity would be lost. If it worked, the Turnoks would be forced to confront an entirely new form of warfare, one that would level the playing field. Alina's voice, though strained, was full of resolve as she explained to General Rowe, "This is our best shot. If we hit them with this technology, it won't just disable their ships. It will prevent them from shifting through dimensions. Their fleets will be stuck vulnerable." General Rowe leaned forward, her eyes hard as steel. "Then we do it. We'll give them everything we've got." Meanwhile, in space, the Turnoks prepared for their final push. Commander Zoreth, the leader of the Turnoks fleet, stood before a vast hologram of Earth, watching as his warships encircled the planet. His species had long known victory, and this final conquest of Earth was simply another feather in their cap. He had expected a brief skirmish, maybe a month of resistance at best, but what had happened was something altogether unexpected. The humans had adapted far faster than they should have. They had become more organized, more resilient, and, most dangerous of all, unpredictable. "Send a fleet to quash the remaining resistance cells," Zoreth ordered coldly. "We will not allow them to rally any longer. The humans will learn the true meaning of extinction." But even as Zoreth issued his commands, a growing unease began to fester within his ranks. His intelligence officers reported strange anomalies in the lower levels of their fleet, as if something was disrupting their dimensional phase technology. Unknown to Zorith, the human weapon was already on its way to deliver the very blow he hadn't seen coming. Captain Lin's team, now on their way to the Turnox flagship, knew that this mission would likely be their last. They had no illusions about survival, but they carried the weight of the entire human race on their shoulders. Earth's fate rested in their hands, and with every step they took, they felt the heavy burden of that responsibility. When they reached the flagship's massive hull, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. The ship seemed alive, its surface shifting and pulsating as though it were a living organism. But there was no time to marvel at it. Their mission was clear. The team made their way into the heart of the ship, using stealth and ingenuity to avoid detection. As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, they encountered Turnox patrols. But with a mix of luck and carefully coordinated movements, they made their way deeper into the bowels of the enemy vessel. As they approached the central command room, Lin's heart raced. They were nearly there. In those final moments, everything seemed to stretch in time. The weight of history was palpable. The fate of humanity rested not on an army, not on superior technology, but on the bravery of a small group of determined individuals who were willing to give everything for a cause much larger than themselves. The cold metallic walls of the Turnox flagship seemed to close in around Captain Lin and her team as they navigated through the ship's core. Their mission had reached its most critical point. They were mere minutes away from planting the weapon that could cripple the Turnox's ability to phase through dimensions. Yet each passing second felt like an eternity, the oppressive silence of the flagship only adding to the tension. "Eyes sharp, everyone," Captain Lin whispered into her comms. Her voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of the mission. The team moved in synchrony, their weapons drawn, hearts pounding with the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything they had ever known. The corridors were dimly lit, with pulsating lights from the Turnox technology casting eerie shadows. The team's footfalls were muffled against the strange, rubberized surface beneath their boots. Every turn they took brought them deeper into the bowels of the flagship, closer to the heart of the Turnox Empire's military might. Suddenly, a low, unnatural hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Lin froze, signaling for the others to do the same. The noise reverberated through the ship like the heartbeat of a massive creature, and the air itself seemed to thicken with an otherworldly tension. "It's the phase generator," whispered Private Harper, a young communications officer who had quickly adapted to the harsh realities of war. "We're close." Lin nodded grimly. "Let's move. We don't have much time." As they pressed forward, an overwhelming sense of being watched swept over them. Despite the efficiency of their movements, it felt as if the very walls of the flagship were observing them, anticipating their every move. The Turnox technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen, and it seemed to pulse with a malignant awareness. The team reached the massive central chamber, where the phase generator lay. It was a towering structure, humming with power, at the very heart of the flagship. The generator was surrounded by intricate alien machinery, cables snaking across the room like veins, and metallic tendrils twisting in the air. The weapon they carried was designed to interface with this very generator, a device powerful enough to short-circuit the Turnox's dimensional phase ability. "Set the charges," Lin ordered, her voice sharp. As the team worked quickly, they knew the clock was ticking. Any moment, the Turnox would discover their presence, and there would be no escape. The weapon, a strange hybrid of human ingenuity and stolen Turnox technology, was designed to exploit the very thing the invaders relied upon for their dominance, their ability to slip between realities. The device would disable the flagship's phase generator, trapping it, and the entire Turnox fleet, within the confines of Earth space. With their advanced ships unable to phase out, they would become vulnerable targets for humanity's last remaining forces. But just as the team completed their final preparations, the sound of heavy footfalls echoed through the chamber. The Turnox had detected their presence. "Ambush!" yelled Sergeant Kim, a former Special Forces operative who had grown accustomed to the brutal realities of warfare. "We're surrounded." The door at the far end of the chamber slammed open with a deafening roar, and a group of Turnox soldiers stormed in. Their towering figures were covered in shimmering, near-invulnerable armor, their eyes glowing with an eerie green light. Their weapons, capable of vaporizing soldiers in a single shot, hummed with deadly intent. The humans were vastly outgunned and outmatched, but they fought with everything they had. Captain Lin and her team opened fire, their small arms seemingly harmless against the Turnox's reinforced armor. Yet they did not falter, retreating behind pillars and weaving through the machinery as they returned fire. Their goal was simple: buy enough time for the device to be activated. Lin took a breath and issued a command with calm precision. Harper, get to the control panel. Kim, cover the door. We'll hold them off. The team scrambled into position, the situation growing ever more desperate. A Turnox soldier, massive and terrifying, lunged at Lin, his claws aiming for her throat. She barely dodged, rolling out of the way and firing a round into his chest. The alien's thick armor absorbed the shot, but the impact staggered him long enough for Lin to draw a second weapon and finish the job. Meanwhile, Private Harper scrambled toward the control panel, his fingers flying over the alien interface. Sweat poured down his face as he muttered to himself, struggling to decipher the alien symbols. Come on, he muttered, his voice tight with panic. The Turnox soldiers were relentless, their eyes glowing with the predatory instinct of a species that had never known defeat. They advanced, but the humans held their ground, even as the odds grew slimmer by the second. Lin's pulse quickened as the pressure mounted. Her team had no backup, no reinforcements. It was them against the full might of the Turnox military. Harper, you've got this? Lin called over the comms, her voice steady despite the chaos. I'm almost there. Just a few more seconds. Harper's voice wavered with urgency. The Turnox pressed in harder, their advanced weapons laying waste to the human barricades. Lin's team fought tooth and nail, each shot fired a defiance against the inevitable. They were humans, and they refused to die without a fight. Finally, Harper's voice crackled through the comms. Done. It's activated. Get out of there. Now, Lin shouted, giving the order to fall back. In the chaos of the retreat, Lin's team made a final push toward the exit. They fought tooth and nail to get to the access door, but the Turnox were closing in, determined to eliminate them. The weapon they had planted was ready, but would it work? With the last of their strength, they reached the exit, and Captain Lin slammed the control panel. The doors hissed shut just as a massive explosion rocked the flagship. The entire ship trembled, and a high-pitched wail echoed through the corridors. The Turnox had lost their ability to phase. The explosion shook the flagship to its core, and Captain Lin felt the entire vessel lurch beneath her feet. The hum of the phase generator stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The Turnox's advanced warship trembled as if it were alive, struggling to comprehend the loss of its most powerful weapon, the very technology that had allowed them to dominate across galaxies. We did it. Sergeant Kim's voice came through the comms, filled with disbelief. We actually did it. But Captain Lin knew that the battle wasn't over. The damage had been done, but the true test was yet to come. They had taken down the flagship's ability to phase, but that wouldn't stop the Turnox from retaliating with every ounce of their military might. The clock was ticking, and Earth's window of opportunity was dangerously narrow. Move! Lin barked, her voice a sharp contrast to the shock and awe her team had felt moments before. Get to the extraction point, now. The team, bruised and bloodied but resolute, sprinted down the corridors of the ship, the sound of their footfalls echoing like the beat of a war drum. Behind them, alarms blared, and the Turnox soldiers, furious at the sabotage, mobilized quickly to hunt them down. Their once dominant superiority had been shattered, but their vengeance would be swift. As the team reached the extraction bay, Lin glanced at her watch. They were cutting it close, way too close. The Turnox would be onto them in minutes, and the few remaining escape pods were their only chance to survive. The doors of the extraction bay slid open, revealing a lone escape pod. But the sight of it only brought more urgency. The pod was small, barely enough for the 6 of them, and their mission wasn't over yet. They needed to make sure the weapon's disruption rippled across the entire Turnox fleet. If they left before the Turnox could fully comprehend what had happened, the fleet might still adapt, and Earth would be lost. "Get in," Lynn shouted, her hand gripping the door's activation panel. "Harper, send the final transmission. We need to make sure Earth knows what's coming." Harper, his face smeared with dirt and blood, nodded. He moved quickly to the controls, accessing the comms relay. "Sending the signal now. It'll reach every military base on Earth. If anyone's still standing, they'll know how to hit the Turnox fleet." The extraction pod's engines roared to life, a beacon of hope amid the chaos. As the pod shot off the flagship and into the cold depths of space, Lynn dared a glance back at the now dying ship. The once immense warship that had been a symbol of the Turnox's power was now vulnerable, grounded, its ability to phase between dimensions severed. "Time to go home," Lynn muttered under her breath. Back on Earth, the resistance forces had been preparing for the final phase of the war, unaware of the massive blow they had just dealt to the Turnox. In underground bunkers and hidden bases, human forces were scattered, waiting for a sign that the invasion could be turned around. General Rowe, standing in front of a massive holographic display of Earth's defenses, was in the middle of issuing a new strategy when the signal came in. The transmission, weak and crackling, came through Harper's signal relay, but its content was unmistakable. The weapon had been deployed. The Turnox fleet was vulnerable. Rowe's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in weeks, she felt a surge of hope. "We have a chance," she said, her voice low but fierce. "It's time to hit them while they're down." Across the planet, resistance groups sprang into action. Former military commanders and civilians alike began to organize with newfound urgency. A plan was rapidly devised, based on the Turnox's new vulnerability. Earth's fighters would now have a fighting chance, not just in ground battles, but in space. A coordinated fleet of Earth's remaining ships launched into the void, joined by scavenged Turnox vessels that had been repurposed by human engineers. The war had entered its final stage. At the heart of the Turnox flagship, now stranded in Earth's orbit, Zorith, the Turnox commander, was livid. His once imposing fleet was now crippled, stuck in Earth's gravitational field, unable to phase into other dimensions. His strategic mind raced through options, but he couldn't find a way to turn the tide. "Prepare for combat," Zorith ordered, his voice cold with fury. "We will not let a planet of insignificant insects take what is rightfully ours. We shall crush them, even in this vulnerable state." But as the Turnox scrambled to defend themselves, Earth's forces surged forward. What the Turnox had overlooked in their arrogance, human adaptability, ingenuity, and sheer willpower, was now their greatest weapon. The battle in space was fierce. Turnox warships, once untouchable, now found themselves facing human ingenuity and desperation. Earth's pilots, many of whom had never before taken to the skies, now fought as if their very survival depended on it, which of course it did. In the cold vacuum of space, humanity's fleet clashed with the crippled Turnox warships. The humans used their knowledge of the Turnox's technology to strike at weak points, exploiting their lack of ability to phase out. With each devastating strike, Earth's forces gained ground. But it wasn't just in space where the tide was turning. The ground battles, too, were evolving. With the disruption of the Turnox's fleet, their communication lines were severed. Human resistance groups, united for the first time in the war, began to retake cities. The Turnox were now forced to fight with the ferocity of cornered beasts, but they were outmatched by the relentless human spirit. Back aboard the extraction pod, Captain Lynn watched the unfolding chaos on the distant battlefield. They had done it. They had given humanity a chance. And though she didn't know if she would live to see the end of the war, she knew that their sacrifice had changed the course of history. The battle in space raged on, but the outcome was becoming increasingly clear. The once dominant Turnox fleet, now stranded and unable to phase, was being overwhelmed by the sheer audacity and resourcefulness of humanity. Earth's forces, armed with captured alien technology and a burning desire for survival, pressed forward with all their might, attacking with precision and overwhelming determination. The Turnox had underestimated humanity's adaptability, and now they were paying the price. General Rowe stood at the command center, her gaze fixed on the holographic battlefield in front of her. The display showed Earth's fleet closing in on the last remnants of the Turnox force. The alien ships, once capable of phase shifting at will, were now sitting ducks, helpless against the relentless assault. "We've got them," Rowe murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief. She had led humanity through the darkest of times, and now, against all odds, victory was within their grasp. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the controls, ordering the final push toward the Turnox flagship. "We'll end this now," she said, a steely determination in her eyes. Meanwhile, in the cold reaches of space, Captain Lin and her team's escape pod drifted through the debris field left by the destroyed Turnox ships. They had barely managed to escape the flagship, but now, as they watched the chaos unfold in the distance, there was no mistaking the significance of their actions. The Turnox were no longer invincible. The tide had shifted. Lin's voice broke the silence. "We've done what we came here to do. Now we wait for Earth's final push." Harper nodded. "We're not out of danger yet. The Turnox are still formidable, even without their phase technology. We have to be ready for their retaliation." Just as he spoke, a flash of light caught their attention. The Turnox flagship, now disabled, had unleashed one final counterattack, a barrage of missiles aimed at Earth's fleet. The explosion illuminated the darkness of space, a stark reminder that even in their defeat, the Turnox would go down fighting. But General Rowe's fleet was ready. With the loss of their phase-shifting abilities, the Turnox could no longer coordinate their strikes effectively. Earth's ships moved in unison, firing in perfect synchronization, and within moments, the Turnox flagship exploded into a brilliant inferno. It was over. Back on Earth, the resistance forces flooded the streets of the major cities, reclaiming what had been lost. The Turnox were no longer a shadow looming over the planet. They were now a defeated force, broken and scattered. The battle for Earth was won, but the cost had been immeasurable. The planet was scarred, and many lives had been lost in the struggle. Yet, in the face of destruction, humanity had emerged victorious. In the ruins of what had once been a major Turnox command center, General Rowe stood, surveying the wreckage. Earth had won, but at a steep price. Cities lay in ruins, the population was decimated, and the planet's resources were depleted. Yet the human spirit had proven itself once again, rising from the ashes like a phoenix. The cost had been high, but humanity had endured. "We did it," General Rowe whispered, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "We held on, and we fought back." Across the planet, survivors began to rebuild. The human race had been tested like never before, but the victory against the Turnox was a testament to the strength of their resolve. They would rebuild their world, piece by piece, but they would never forget the lessons they had learned. The Turnox, once conquerors of worlds, had been brought to their knees by a species they had underestimated, a species that had no intention of surrendering. The Earth had been saved, and the invaders, who had once thought themselves gods, were now a mere footnote in the history of humanity. Captain Lin and her team, having survived the escape from a flagship, made their way back to Earth. As they descended through the atmosphere, the sight of their home planet filled their viewports, a beautiful blue marble floating against the backdrop of the stars. There was still work to be done, but the worst was behind them. "We did it," Lin said, her voice full of both relief and exhaustion. "We've won." "We've earned this," Kim added quietly, staring out at the planet below. "But the work's not over. There's always rebuilding to do." Harper nodded. "One step at a time. We've got a world to rebuild, and we're the ones who'll do it." The pod descended through the clouds, heading toward what remained of the human capital. Their mission was complete, and their sacrifices had secured Earth's future. As the team's pod touched down, they were met by the leaders of the human resistance. their faces a mix of exhaustion and hope. The war was over. Earth had survived. But now, as the rebuilding began, humanity faced an uncertain future. They had won, but the cost had been high. The scars of war would remain, but so too would the strength of their unity. They had been pushed to the brink of extinction, but the last stand of humanity had turned into the greatest victory in history. The sky above Earth was no longer filled with the sounds of war. The echoes of laser blasts and the terrifying hum of alien warships had faded into history. Yet the scars of the conflict remained, visible in the shattered cities, the vast swaths of ruined land, and the lingering sadness in the eyes of survivors. Humanity had won, but the battle had come at an unimaginable cost. In the years that followed the Turnox's defeat, Earth slowly began the process of rebuilding. It wasn't easy. The resources that had once fueled the global economy were now scarce, and the population was spread thin across scattered communities. Yet in the wake of the destruction, there was something else, something far more valuable. There was hope. General Rowe, once a symbol of unyielding resolve during the war, now stood at the helm of a united world, leading the effort to rebuild from the ashes of their victory. The human race had proven its mettle, but now it had to prove its ability to rise from the depths of despair and create a future worth living for. What now? General Rowe asked as she looked out over the new capital. The city, though in ruins, was teeming with activity. People were working together, clearing debris, building homes, and restoring the foundation of civilization. The Turnox may be gone, said Captain Lin, who had become a symbol of the human resistance, but the lessons they taught us will remain. We have to ensure that we never allow ourselves to fall into complacency again. You're right, Rowe said, turning to face her. The war is over, but our survival is a constant battle. The future of humanity depends on our ability to adapt, to be resilient, and to never forget the price we paid. Despite the devastation, there was a palpable sense of unity. Earth's global forces had come together in a way they never had before, pooling their knowledge, resources, and resolve to create something greater than the sum of their parts. The enemy had been formidable, but humanity had proven it could withstand the worst and emerge stronger. Dr. Alina Kerr, one of the brilliant scientists who had helped develop the weapon that crippled the Turnox's dimensional technology, stood beside Rowe, her eyes scanning the horizon. The war had changed everything, but it had also ignited a new era of scientific exploration and discovery. We've learned a lot, Alina said softly. The Turnox weren't just invaders. They were interdimensional travelers, with technology far beyond our own. But we've managed to reverse engineer a lot of their tech. Imagine what we could achieve now that we understand their methods. We need to think bigger, Rowe replied. This isn't just about rebuilding our cities. We need to explore the stars, prepare for any other threats that might come our way. The Turnox were just one part of a much larger universe. We can't be complacent again. Alina smiled, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of possibility. We'll be ready. Across the planet, the war had sparked a new sense of purpose. Earth's united forces, now working together in peace rather than in battle, focused their energy on not only rebuilding the planet, but also exploring the stars. New alliances were formed, not out of fear, but from the shared experience of survival. The once fractured world now stood as a single, cohesive entity, united by the struggle against a common enemy. Humanity's first steps into space had been under the shadow of the Turnox invasion, a desperate push for survival. But now, with the war behind them, those same steps carried a different weight. The stars no longer represented an unreachable, distant frontier, but a place to which humanity now belonged. We're not just survivors, Captain Lin said, her voice strong and confident. We're pioneers. We've proven that no matter the odds, humanity can rise to the challenge. As she spoke, the first human colony ships, built with the help of repurposed Turnox technology, lifted off from Earth's surface, bound for the distant stars. They were heading to the first of many new worlds humanity had set its sights on. There would be more challenges ahead, new enemies to face, and unknown threats to confront. But Earth was ready. For the first time in history, humanity was no longer looking just to survive. They were looking to thrive. The Earth, scarred but not broken, watched as the ships ascended into the sky. General Rowe, Captain Lin, and the rest of humanity stood together, watching as the horizon stretched out before them. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt full of possibility. The Turnoks had come to Earth with the arrogance of a conqueror. They believed that no force could stand against them. They believed humanity was weak. But they had been wrong. Humanity had not only survived the Turnoks' invasion, they had turned it into their greatest victory in history. A victory forged in the fires of adversity, one that would echo through the ages. The war had ended, but the real story of humanity had only just begun. And thus, the last stand of humanity became a turning point in history, not just for Earth, but for the entire cosmos. The future was now a canvas, ready to be shaped by the hands of those who had fought to protect it. The stars were no longer a distant dream, but a place where humanity's legacy would unfold, one world at a time.